Hello and welcome to the Patrick Chapman Show. I'm Patrick Chapman and here we go. So it's a beautiful Saturday afternoon, just wonderful. A little bit of a shame to be in the house actually, but later I'll go jogging, I think. Get outside a little bit just to start to get in shape for football, which is coming. Football's coming up, and that's the first note I want to make. A little bit of business to report before we get to the topic. So if there is anybody listening who's a young man, let's say between the ages of 17 and 70, living in or near Kąty Wrocławskie, that's where we have football trainings, and we're going to have recruitment with the Jaguars, that's my team, on the 15th of October. So that's coming up in a few weeks, and that's a Wednesday. It'll be Wednesday evening at 7:30 in the evening. So 19:30. The 15th of October, we invite any young men who, even if you don't know anything about American football, or you're not even sporty, but you want to try something new, come on out and try it, and we'll put you through the test and see if you like it or you don't like it. It's worth trying, and we get a lot of guys out there, and it's a lot of fun. It's just fun. I recommend it. On that particular night, I won't be there probably because it's a Wednesday and I got to work on Wednesday, so I always miss the Wednesday practices unless there's an exception. So it's 90% sure that I won't be at that training. But then on that Friday, we'll also start our camp, and my good friend from America, Emir, is going to be coming into town, and I think he'll be attending the camp with me. So, and I'm looking forward to that. I really am looking forward to playing with him out on the gridiron. Good. So that's the football news coming up. Yeah. Okay. Now, last time I made a little mistake, as I often do. I realized like an hour later when I'm thinking about what I just said on the podcast that I said something wrong, or I got the facts not quite right, or I forgot to say something. And so, for example, just as an example of that, one time I was talking about Elk Grove Village, and I said it was Tim Latman that lived on Claremont behind the Santowskis. It wasn't Tim Latman, it was Billy Latman. So I got the name wrong. I stand corrected, but a little bit late. And last time I was doing these poems. I was reading a poem, and I was talking about Polish poetry and how some of it's really good. And I was talking about pszczyna. And I said the poem goes something like Chrząszcz brzmi w pszczynie. And that's not the line at all. It's Chrząszcz brzmi w trzcinie. But there is pszczyna in the poem, but it's in the very last line when it says Bo chrząszcz właśnie bręczał w pszczynie. So I knew that pszczyna was in there somewhere, but it's not in that first line. Anyway, so we're going to start with a little poetry. Bear with me. I know this is a little tedious, but it is for me too, but it's fun. I have fun doing it. And it's really good poetry. I got to tell you, last time I didn't tell you the author. And that one, I'm not going to go back to it now. Sorry. But here's the book. It's called Kaczka Dziwaczka I inne wiersze, if you can see that. And it's by Jan Brzechwa. So, genius poet. Here we go. So this one is called Chrząszcz. Let me show it to you. Here's the picture. And you see the chrząszcz right there in the picture. That's a chrząszcz. Now, is that a beetle, or is that just some kind of bug, or is it a cricket? I don't know what that is. I don't know. That's a chrząszcz. And then you see the vul. There's the vul. And the guy, what's the guy's name? Maciek. That's Maciek. And the vul. And the kura. Okay. So let's go with that. I'll just read it as quick as I can in my horrible Polish. I get a kick out of this. Here we go. W Szczebrzeszynie chrząszcz brzmi w trzcinie I Szczebrzeszyn z tego słynie. Wół go pyta, panie chrząszczu, po co pan tak brzęczy w gąszczu? Jak to, po co? To jest praca, każda praca się opłaca. A cóż za to pan dostaje? Też pytanie, wszystkie gaje, wszystkie trzciny, powsie, czasy, łąki, pola oraz lasy, nawet rzeczki, nawet zdroje, wszystko to jest właśnie moje. Wół pomyślał, znakomicie, też rozpocznę takie życie. Wrócił do domu i wesoło zaczął brzęczeć pod stodołą. Powolemu, tęgim basem. A tu Maciek szedł tymczasem, jak nie wrzaśnie, cóż to znaczy? Czemu to się wół próżniaczy? Jak to? Czyż ja nic nie robię? Przecież właśnie brzęczę sobie. Ja ci tu pobrzęczę wolę, dosyć tego, jazda w pole. I dał taką mu robotę, że się wół oblewał potem. Po robocie pobiegł w gąszczce, już ja to na chrząszczu pomszczę. Lecz nie zastał chrząszcza w ścinie, bo chrząszcz właśnie brzęczał w pścinie. Okay, that's a tough one, but a good one. Now here's my favorite one, I think of all. There are a lot of favorites, but this is a good one. This one's called Psie Smutki. So here you see the one little pies smutki, right, with the kaczka and a kalk. And not the muha. We're not talking about the muha. Where's the muha? Not him, the other one. How can I get it on the camera? There, that one. That one. Psie Smutki. Okay, here we go with this Psie Smutki, also by Jan Brzechwa. Psie Smutki. Na brzegu błękitnej rzeczki mieszkają małe smuteczki. Ten pierwszy jest z tego powodu, że nie wolno wchodzić do ogrodu. Drugi, że wora nie chce być sucha. Trzeci, że mucha wleciała do ucha. A jeszcze, że kot musi drapać, że kura nie daje się złapać, że nie można gryźć w nogę sąsiada i że z nieba kiełbasa nie spada. A ostatni smuteczek jest o to, że człowiek jedzie, a piesek musi biec piechotą. Lecz wystarczy pieskowi dać mleczko i już nie ma smuteczków nad rzeczką. The dog is sad because hot dogs don't fall from the sky. I love that. Okay, enough of that silliness. Let's go to the next thing. So we got the football, we got the chrząszcz, and the Psie Smutki, and we got the, this reading the poetry reminds me of poetry parties. And the first time I experienced one of these was in Radom, and I'm not talking about Radom today. That's a topic for another time. But one thing we did in Radom was somebody had the idea of having poetry night in one of the cafes. And so I think one night a week, I don't know if it was every week, but sometimes we would meet at this cafe, and the fun of it was you're supposed to just read a poem, and you could read one in any language, and you could read two or three if you wanted. It could be your own poem that you had written, or somebody else's, some famous, like The Raven or something less famous, or something like that, what I just did in Polish, or there were other languages that people spoke, maybe Spanish or Russian or something. And it was just fun. It's actually more fun than you would think it would be. Kind of like bowling. Was bowling fun? Yes, it is once you start doing it. And this was kind of fun. And they gave me the idea to have these, when I got to Dębica, which is the topic of today, I would sometimes have a poetry party. And so, I think for my birthday one year I did that. Maybe I did it once. I know I did it once. Maybe I did it twice or three times. But at least once we had a poetry party. And, people are weird about it. What? It's kind of like, it's almost like a costume party in which, okay, you can understand that because that happens. You know, we have costume parties and they're fun. But when it comes to the work of actually picking out a costume and making one or putting one on, it's like, can we make this simple? Like, I don't want to put on a costume. It's a little bit of work, you know, it's a little bit of effort. And the poetry thing is even weirder because, you know, nobody has poetry parties. And who does that? And so you're like, that sounds weird. I don't want to do that. Like, I gotta read poetry, a poem. I don't know any poems. I mean, oh God, I hate poetry anyway. A lot of it doesn't even rhyme. It's like, so we just like throw that half into the sea, and you know, so, and you're thinking, I don't want to read in front of people, but then if you force yourself to choose just one poem, and then you come, you show up, and then you read one, it's fun. It's actually fun. It's really fun, and I recommend it, and I might do it again someday. Although there is a kind of such a resistance by some people that it just doesn't work. But let's not talk about that. Let's go on to the topic of today, which is Dębica. So Dębica. And first of all, shout out to all my old friends and the workers at TC Dębica, tire company Dębica, which used to be the Dębica Tire Company, but either while I was there or right before I moved there, it was bought out by Goodyear, the Goodyear Tire Company. And so it actually became an American company, I guess, having been bought out by Goodyear. But we still call it Dębica. I think it is still named Dębica, but I don't know if they changed the name or not yet because it's been some years since I lived there. Oh, it's been decades now. Jeez. But yeah, all my old students and friends from the company especially, but also some other people, you know. But that's one of those small towns. Dębica's not a big city. It's a small city. And it's got that one big factory. You know, there are other businesses also and other things going on, but that factory was the employer for the whole town in the old days. Then after the big change in, well, it would have been 89, 90, 91, those years when the big changes were going, things changed. I mean, they downsized basically, and they've probably been downsizing ever since. And even when I was teaching there, my students were a little desperate to learn English because they were in fear of losing their jobs, and that's a scary thing. I've said this before. I don't know if I've said it on the podcasts, but I always felt a little bit sorry for the guys who were about, let's say, 30 years old. Imagine you're a 30-year-old man in 1989, and the big change happens. Well, now, under the communist system, up until 89, you were guaranteed a job, and pretty much guaranteed a place to live. So you had an apartment. It might be a crappy, horrible apartment, but it was an apartment. And you had a job, and it might be, well, we don't have any jobs, so we're going to give you a job, and your job is to take care of these 2 chickens, you know, and that's what you do all day. You watch these 2 chickens and make sure they're well fed or something. They would just make up jobs for people, because they didn't really have the kind of jobs that we think about in the American mindset. And then that all changed. So imagine, back to my hypothetical, imagine you're a 30-year-old man, the change comes, and now you're not guaranteed a job anymore, and you might have a job, but as the years go by, 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, and they start, you know, well, we can't pay a guy to take care of 2 chickens anymore, so that job is closed, and we'll try to find another one for you, but there might not be one. And now we'll look at that 30-year-old guy. He doesn't speak English. Well, he might have learned a little Russian, but that's pretty useless at this point and going forward. He never learned computers because he was a chicken guy. He was taking care of chickens, 2 chickens. And he drinks a bit and he smokes, and he's got 2 kids and a wife. And he goes to church on Sundays because they told him he couldn't. And so that's why he does. And so here's this poor guy without any skills. He doesn't know computers or English. He does whatever his job. And I'm joking about the chickens, but maybe he's an electrician or a plumber or some worker. But he's beyond the age of getting himself re-educated. Not all of them. Some of them could do that, if they had the wherewithal. But a lot of people don't. They didn't think about incentive or work ethic or things like that, like they need to do now. And I think those guys had it tough. And it was a lot of those guys, those middle-aged or a little younger, almost middle-aged guys with families who lost their jobs. And when a man loses his job and doesn't have a job, man, that's your manhood, that's who you are. And so you hang out with the other guys under a tree in the center and you drink. You drink and you smoke and that's it. So some of those guys just ended up in bad shape, I think. And I kind of feel sorry for them because the system changed on them when they didn't expect it to. Okay, I'm on a little sidetrack here, going back to Dębica. So I moved to Dębica from Bielsko-Biała. What year was this? Late 90s? I think 98, let's say. Ray Kites, whom I talked about last time, drove me there in his car. Actually, he drove me and my stuff, where we parked the stuff there and stored it at the beginning of the summer. And at the end of the summer, I went back and moved into an apartment. And my first apartment was just a basic block apartment, really nice, and the company paid for it. So I had a great contract. I made a lot of money. They paid me a nice hourly wage. I don't remember how much, but this was a long time ago, and it was pretty good. Like, it would have been about what they're paying me now, 20-something years later in the schools, So, really nice setup. Free apartment, free plane ticket home and back for the summers. So I moved into this apartment, and it was a nice little place for one guy, much bigger than I needed, with a nice little balcony, a tiny, but one of those little balconies you can just like step outside on, and but you gotta have a balcony, even if it's a little one, because I've been in places without them, and you gotta go all the way downstairs and out the door to really see what is going on outside. So right, and I was teaching in that company, so my job was in the tire company, and because the workers were working, we would have lessons in the afternoon after they finished work. They would go straight to the cultural center, and we'd have our lessons in that building, and we would go from, I don't know if it was 3:30, about, maybe they finished at 3, we started at 3:30, and we would go till about 8 o'clock at night, so it was like a long session of different lessons with different groups, and very often those lessons were kind of fun because very often we would go for an ognisko, like a bonfire party, or we'd go to a restaurant and have the lesson in a restaurant or a bar, depending on who was there and what we wanted to do. But like I said before, sometimes you gotta be, as the teacher, you gotta be a little responsible and a little bit careful of whether you're actually having a lesson or if anybody's learning anything. And right. So I moved into that first apartment in the block building, and then just a short time after that, I had to move out of there into another apartment in the same building, but a different stairwell entrance. And what was funny was that I had gotten used to that first apartment, which was on the second, it was like one flight up. I would open the main door, go up one flight of stairs, put my key in, open the door, and be in, right? So now I moved about 2 doorways over, to the right, let's say. But now my apartment was up one more level. So instead of going up one flight, I go up 2 flights. And I put my key in and I open the door. Well, the problem is it's like walking into a room where you turn on the light. You go into your kitchen, you turn on the light, you reach over, boom, and then it becomes automatic to where you walk in the kitchen, you turn on the light. Well, now if you go to a hotel or you move, maybe not a hotel, but like you move or you have a vacation and you're in a different house or apartment or different place with different kitchen, you go and you reach over your kitchen, there's no lights. Oh, it's on this side, it's on the left side, not the right. And so, but you automatically, instinctively go to the right end, but it's on the left now. So you got to get used to it and retrain your brain and your body, your muscle memory, right? So I remember in the new apartment, I would run up that first flight of stairs, stick my key in the door, try to turn it, it didn't open it. And it's not my door. Oops. I go quietly up the stairs and then go to my door and open it. And like hope nobody heard me trying to open it. And that happened not once, but at least twice. And the second time, I run upstairs, put my key in the door, it doesn't turn, I did it again. I hope nobody heard me. And I hear the lady yelling at me. And I hadn't been drinking or anything, it's just one of those muscle memory mistakes. Oops, wrong door, sorry. A little embarrassing. Okay, but it's one of those embarrassing things you can laugh at, especially long after the fact. Okay, and speaking of embarrassing, so later I got another apartment, we'll talk about that later too, but anyway, those first two apartments were paid for, and that was nice. Later that system changed, but we'll talk about that in a bit here. So first and second apartment, and then I started jogging, and speaking of embarrassing, so in those days in Poland, and this is late 90s, as I said, nobody jogged. And this is Poland B, as they say, Polska Bay. And so that means basically it's on the eastern side of Poland. And they call it, there's like Polska A and Polska Bay. Poland A and Poland B. Poland A being the west, because it's a little bit more westernized. It's closer to the bigger, the west. It's got the bigger cities maybe, and it's more industrial, a little bit more maybe educated or cultural. I don't know how to say it without, embarrassing myself. But and then the other side is a little more rural and closer to the east, Russia and or Ukraine. And so there's this saying, I don't know, it's not my creation, I've heard of it. We say Polska Bay, Poland B. Here's the joke I want to make though. Sometimes you see these nationalists and they'll write graffiti and it looks like kind of nationalistic graffiti, and it'll say Polska dla Polaków, which means like Poland for the Polacks, right? Poland for the Polacks. It's kind of like anti-immigrant, let's say, like pro-Poland, pro-Polish people. Anti-immigrant, I guess, is what it is. And I always wanted to put the B after Polska. Polska Bay dla Polaków. That was my little joke. Okay, let's go on here. So jogging. So I started jogging, and in those days nobody jogged in Poland. It just wasn't, and especially in Polska Bay. Nobody, it would be like weird to be exercising, or unless you're a professional. Like if you're a professional soccer player or bodybuilder, okay, go do your exercises. But if you're just a guy, like a teacher, like what are you, you're jogging? You're supposed to be smoking. Or walking your dog, maybe. That's why people have dogs, so they can get a little exercise in the winter, especially when you don't want to leave your house. So I would go out, and when I went jogging, I would have to go outside the city, which isn't hard to do because it's not a big city, and there's always a forest right next to the city in Poland. It's not like America where you have the city and then you have the suburbs and then the sprawl of urban sprawl. And then finally you start to reach the cornfields or the forest or whatever's out there beyond. But no, we got the forest right there, so you can go picking mushrooms or whatever, even if you live in the city. And so I would go jogging out in the forest, through the farm fields, etc., away from the people, so I wouldn't be, stared at and pointed at, like, look at the weirdo. And, it was good. I would go jogging, and I would go a little bit farther every day. I did this one way that I would always go the same route, and up the hill. There was a nice hill through the forest, and then what was kind of nice was a good challenge, and it took me a while to get to that point, but if I got to near the end of the road, not quite the end, but like to where I was going to go further, there was a nice steep incline where you had to go up steep, and that was hard, and it was about, let's say, 30 yards or 40 yards of steep incline, and that's at the end of the run going away from home. So like, the halfway point. And I would try to get up that steep incline, and then I felt like, okay, I've done my job. I completed the task, although I still had to go all the way home. But coming home was more downhill, and just a fun run. But getting back to the embarrassing points, one time out running, this was on a different route, I think, because I remember I was on a sidewalk near the street. And so, the sidewalk wasn't quite even, and my toe clipped the sidewalk, and I tripped and just fell right on my face. I mean, just flat out on the sidewalk, knees skinned, and, hands out there. My keys, I carried my keys in my hand, and so they go flying, and I got to, pick myself up. And normally, the whole route, I mean, most of it, there are no people. Most of it. But here I'm right in front of 3 or 4 kids outside playing. Right in front of the kids. Boom! Splattered out on the sidewalk. Oops. And it had to be then, it had to be right there in front of those people. It couldn't be just out in the middle of the forest where there's nobody except maybe an odd deer or a rabbit or something. Boy. Okay, so I tripped and I fell. And it doesn't happen often, but when it does happen, it's in front of the kids. Okay. Oh, and then there was another time. So I met some good people in Dębica, and one of them was my good friend Ralph. Okay, and Ralph and I don't really have contact anymore, not for any reason. I still got his email and stuff, but we don't tend to communicate much anymore. But hello, Ralph, if you're listening. Ralph was a great guy, good friend there, and Ralph is from England. And what's interesting about Ralph is he's not an English teacher. He works in the company, and his Polish is good enough to actually work in the tire company. And I don't know how many people now, because it's been decades, as I've said, how many people are actually still working in that company, or whether Ralph is or not, I don't know. He always was up until the last time I talked to him, I think, which would have been a few years ago. But so Ralph comes over to my house one day, and I'm getting ready to go jogging. But this was, I think it was Boże Ciało, which in English is Corpus Christi, which is a holiday here in Poland, usually in June. I think in June. And so I think it was Boże Ciało, or Corpus Christi. And it might have been a different holiday. But the point is, everybody in the town was going to be outside, and they have this procession that walks through the streets with behind the priest, So they go to church, and they have a procession. It's really quite nice, but the point is, Ralph told me, no, you do not go jogging today. You don't want to be seen by those people in the procession, and you're out jogging. It would just be too big of a contrast. And you can't do that. He warned me, and he said, no, don't do it. Not today. And so I didn't. I didn't. On his advice, and it was good advice, I think. Good. Another time I was jogging along the river. Yeah, I would, I know why it was a different route. I was in a different apartment then, so I would start from a different point. And sometimes I would go along the river instead of up into the hills. And so I'm jogging along the river, and I'm kind of into a trance, as you do, and I'm running slowly, And in my trance, I kind of hear a voice behind me, but in the distance, and I'm not paying attention. But after some time, some repetitions, I realized somebody's yelling behind me, But it took a few yells before I realized somebody might be yelling at me, and I'm thinking, why? What's going on in the world that somebody would be yelling to anybody while I'm out jogging? And is it to me? This is what I don't know. So I'm like, and I hear this proszę pana, So I stop, and I kind of turn around, and I see a man, I don't know if he's waving his arms, yelling at me, and I see a dog running toward me, and it's a German Shepherd. And so I stopped, and that's what he wanted me to do. He said, "Stop running, because here comes my dog." So luckily the dog didn't do anything. I think he might have run up to me or something, but that's a scary moment, What are people thinking with their dogs outside? And this is because no Polak in Polska Bay at that time in the late 90s would expect anybody to be jogging when you're supposed to be smoking. Like I was such an idiot. I chose the wrong hobby. So his dog ran up to me, and then it wasn't a problem. But the man was he's an old guy. He's not going to run like I was running to catch his dog. Nothing happened. But I do remember it, and I remember that fear, I'm going to be chased down by a dog. And if I hadn't stopped, he might have bitten me. And people do get bit by dogs. I remember in the Peace Corps, they would tell us that. People, when you're out jogging, they will come up and bite you right on the bottom. All right. Okay, so Ralph and I became pretty good friends. And then there were some other guys in that group, too. And we would get together and play guitars. And, I was playing guitar at that time. But I was never very good at it. I wasn't good. I've never been a good student of anything. And I would try to learn things, and Ralph showed me some things and taught me some songs, and that was fun. We would play together. And mainly I would do the basic parts, like the rhythm, easy chords, and then he could fiddle around with the fiddly bits, right? And so we had a lot of fun doing that. And he had a nice little, nice, I always use that word nice. I got to get away from that. Good. He had a kind of a shack on what you call a działka, which is like a garden plot. So he had this garden plot where we could go and, with a little cabin or a little shack in there, we could play in there, and put on the barbecue, set up the barbecue with some kotlety, like karkówki or something, really good. Barbecue up those things on the grill, and have with a couple of beers, and a couple of guitars playing, and it was a lot of fun. So we did that often, and Ralph taught me a lot about the guitar, but now I don't play anymore, and that's why we don't talk, because that's what we mainly talk about. I don't want to play the guitar anymore. But yeah, Ralph was a good guy. He was I just remember he didn't want to teach English at all. He didn't want anything to do with that. He wanted to do his job, and because it's so natural for a guy from England to get caught up into the teaching thing, and he just resisted and refused. And good for him, because he had a real job, let's say. Mm-hmm. And, okay, let me go to this next thing. So my third apartment, let me talk about that. So then they changed the contract where we didn't get a free apartment, we had to pay for it, but they gave us a raise in pay. So we got more per hour, but we had to pay for our own apartment. And I don't remember if the company helped us find an apartment or not, but I remember I had this situation, because sometimes people will try to take advantage of the fact that you don't speak the language, or you just don't know the system. And they know that you don't know, and so they can trick you or take advantage. And I think I was coming back for the third year, because I was in Dębica for 3 years. So during that summer, let's say, between the second and third year, I was supposed to move out of the one apartment and into the new apartment. And I got a notice from somebody, probably, I don't know if it was an email, because I didn't really use email much yet. maybe I got a telephone call or something else. But I was informed that I had to go to this specific apartment, and I came to find out that it was a little bit farther away than what I wanted, you know. But I'm like, well, all right, I guess I can, you know, I can live there and I can manage. It's not going to kill me. But where did this come from that I have to live there? And I quickly put two and two together that, you know, the company had been paying for the apartments, and probably overpaying, if I know the company. They were probably paying more than the market price. So whoever was the owner, the landlord of the apartment, was making good money, better than he would have made. And so then everybody wants to be that guy, you know. They want me to live in their apartment so they can make that money, and I don't see the money. You know, I didn't know how much they were paying for my apartment. I came to find out they were also paying for a lady to come clean the apartment once a week. I'm like, because she did come sometimes, and I'm like, I'm always embarrassed in those situations. Like, the best cleaning lady is the one who comes and cleans. The worst one, which is the other kind, and the one I almost always get, which I've only had like one or two I think, is that asks you what you want them to do. I go, like, what would you like me to do? Clean? I don't know. What do I have to tell you? Like, there's a little dust on me from years. There's years worth of dust on the lamp shade thing above the light. I don't know. Do I have to tell you to clean my toilet? Like, do I have to say that? Like, if I have to say that, I'll just leave. So this lady came to my apartment 2, 3, 4 times, and then like on a Saturday or something, and then I just told her, just don't come anymore. And I think she still took the money. I don't know. I never saw the money. I had no idea how much she was making, what she was supposed to do. Nobody talked to me about that, but I'm sure she was getting paid. So going back to this story though about the apartment, so some guy told me I was supposed to live in this particular apartment. But I think I had already arranged the other part. That's why it was a conflict. I had arranged through students, because this is a great network. When I have my students, I got, 3, 4, 5 groups, classes of students, not to mention all the other ones, like private lessons and stuff. It's a great network. I just say, hey, I need an apartment. Does anybody out there know anybody that wants to rent me an apartment? And that's how I did it, I think. So I got set up with this other apartment. In the meantime, I got this one that I got set up that I arranged. Another guy telling me I have to live in this apartment, and he's kind of telling me I have to. I'm like, I have to? This sounds like somebody trying to hoodwink me into something. So I go to one of my students who's one of the bosses at the company, because I go in and I teach the bosses. They want the English, they learn it, and they're paying for it. The company's paying for them. So I talk to this guy and I tell him the problem, and I could see in his eyes, he's like, he's thinking what I'm thinking. This is shenanigans, and in Polish, you would call this kombinacja. That's a good translation for kombinacja, shenanigans, or finagling. Somebody's finagling, somebody's up to shenanigans. So he immediately picks up the phone, calls the guy, and basically bites his head off. And that was the end of it. That was the end of it. There was no more issue. And I'm like, wow, that was cool. So I didn't even have to deal with that anymore. And I moved into the new place, which I had arranged, and I was paying for it. Now I could see the money because I'm paying for it, but it was okay. I was making enough that it didn't matter, and I also wasn't spending any money. I was a bachelor. What do I spend money on? I don't buy clothes. I don't travel. I don't go to restaurants that much. I would eat at the stołówka, the company's stołówka, which is like a cafe or what do you call it in a company? The company diner? Cafeteria, maybe, cafeteria. And it was great because what I loved about the stołówki in the schools or companies, a lot of times there's no choice. That you get soup and you get the second dish, the main dish, and that's what they're serving today. And every day's different, but if there's no not wanting it. You just eat what they give you, and it's always good. So always soups are great. We've talked about that. And then the second dish, some meat dish with some potatoes and some salad or something, and you're full, and it's good. So that was great, and it's not too expensive. So I would eat there for my obiats, and then so the point is I wasn't spending money, and I was just making money and saving it up, and it was really good time. Also, I want to say this. I had said previously when we were talking about both Dobiedniew and Bielsko-Biała, that I didn't really like private lessons. I didn't take them. In the Peace Corps, we weren't supposed to take them anyway. We weren't supposed to make any money with them, whether we did them or not. And I did some in Bielsko-Biała because they kind of twisted my arm, and I just was never comfortable with it. I didn't know what to do with these people when they wanted private lessons. But it was in Dębica that I came up with a plan, and I started taking them, and my schedule got filled up pretty well to where I was teaching in the mornings. My mornings were pretty free, except I would go in for lessons at the company with the bosses. So they would have lessons on work time. And what was great about that was, but it's short-term great. It's one of those short-term greats that's not good in the long run. It's bad in the long run, but it's short-term good, is that they would cancel all the time. Because English lesson was never quite as important as meeting with their boss or, emergency on the production line or whatever else came up on that day. It was always easy to cancel an English lesson. But the trick is I got paid for it. So they would sign a little piece of paper that said, the lesson happened or whatever, but then I would go home. So a lot of non-lessons, like non-work, and I could go do what I wanted. So I had free time that I got paid for working for. So that was great. But it doesn't last forever. They're not stupid, and they know, okay, in this whole year I was supposed to have 100 lessons, and I had 6. So they're not stupid. They're not going to keep doing that forever. So you end up losing those lessons, and it's better just to not, it's better just to have the lesson instead of having the free time, although it feels good in the moment. So I would have those lessons in the morning, and then, like I said, the company lessons in the Dom Kulturi in the afternoon. And in the meantime, there was a school, Britannia or Britannica. It was either Britannia or I think it was Britannia. And I worked for that school a little bit, just a little bit. And then just private lessons at home, and I filled up my schedule to where I was working on Saturdays, and I even had one lesson on Sunday. And I remember it got critical for me to plan my lessons on the weekend, especially Sunday, for the whole week, because I was so busy, I had no time to plan the night before. I would come home late at night, exhausted, eat, sleep, get up early, go all day. And that's when I was really making some good money. And my schedule was full. Those were the days. Okay. So in that third apartment now, so this is the new one, and this had a big balcony. What do you call that big balcony? A terrace. It had a terrace. And what was cool was, I guess there must have been a railing around the terrace, and then from the top, coming down from the terrace above mine, there were these grapevines growing. Actually, they were growing up. They came down from the garden below and grew up over mine and then over to the top. So there was a kind of, when it was the season, like the summer season, the leaves would grow big, and I had that nice wall of grapevines with real grapes on them. You can eat the grapes. But the point is that I had some privacy. Because in the winter when it died and it was just brown, it wasn't so thick and people could see through, they could see me. But I'm not going to be out there much in the winter anyway. But it was a really great terrace. And I bought myself a barbecue grill. And I had one party. I talked about the poetry parties. I had one there. And I also had a grill party one time. where I tried to make hamburgers, and I remember my friend, my neighbor actually, my student Jerzy, came over from across the hall, and he rescued me, because when you're the host of a party, it's not easy, and it's not even so much fun. The host doesn't get to have much fun, because you're busy, as people come, you're then, offering them the beer or the tea, whatever they want to drink, and then making sure they're comfortable, happy, introduce them, show people where the toilet is, and then make a little chit chat, and then go try to do the burgers, or light the thing, and it's not lighting, or the burgers aren't cooking fast, or something, or then what about the buns and all this stuff? It can be a little bit. It's like work, you're working, you're not playing, you're working. And Jerzy stepped in with helping with the grill, and that was a save. He kind of saved me. He rescued me there, but it ended up good. I think it ended up good. It's not stressful if you're a guest at a party. I don't think it could be. What, you gonna complain that the hamburgers aren't ready on time? Anyway, we had fun. Good days there. Yeah. Okay. So, another little place in the town was this Herbačarnia. And the people there were wonderful, the owners, and I would go in and get a coffee. I didn't drink tea. I'm not a tea drinker. Sometimes a little bit, so this is like a tea place, tea house. But I like coffee. So, but they had coffee also, and sometimes we would have lessons there, now that I remember. I said we would go to restaurants and things, and sometimes we would go to the Herbačarnia. And that was a nice place for a lesson. They had art on the walls. I think one time they had like an art exhibition where some artist came in and put up his or her stuff. And I would get coffee, and I would get, what kind of coffee did I get that they made so well? Wasn't Cafe Olé. It was some special coffee that I liked, and they made it like perfectly. Really great. It was some of the best coffee I've ever had. The best coffee I've ever had in my life is at Café du Monde, and in New Orleans. That's probably the best coffee. But at the Herbačarnia, they also made probably the second best coffee in the world. Let's say world's second best coffee. Okay, but really nice place. They didn't really have a lot of food, like a big menu, but they did have things like nalashniki, so you could get something to eat there. And they had a little bit of an outside area, like 1 or 2 tables outside if it was nice weather, and then the inside part. And it was those people, I want to say Andrzej and Agnieszka, but I hope I got that right. And they also invited me, because I was playing the guitar, and they invited me to another town. I don't remember the name of the town, but they had another place in another town, and it was St. Patrick's Day. So, and I had talked about green beer, how it's a kind of a tradition to have green beer. And it's easy to make. You just put one drop of green food coloring in your beer, and you got green beer. So they had a St. Patrick's Day party where I went and I performed a concert. And I remember practicing up for it, I wore a green shirt, I think, or a green tie, and I played my guitar in front of people, and I sang, and it was a lot of fun. I just wish I were better, I wish I had more talent, so I could really do something, but okay. Guitar is a great instrument because it always sounds good. You can be pretty lousy, and it still sounds okay. You can't be lousy on the trumpet or the violin or some other instruments, but on the guitar, you can be kind of lousy, and it's kind of okay. So you can fudge your way through it. All right, so Dębica days. Right, and at the end of the year, we would have parties at the company. Like year end, we're done with the school year, and the summer is here, and so we have a big party with everybody together, and that was always a blast. So good old Dębica. Okay, I'm going to be done. Remember, football recruitment for the Jaguars in Conti Wrocławskie. Anybody interested, please show up on the 15th of October at 19:30 o'clock. I probably won't see you there. Okay, that's it for today. Thank you, and we'll talk again.